We have this idea about nature and about animals in general, that sort of everything is perfect and very simple and very clean and straightforward, and kind of humans are the ones who are kind of a mess. And what I intend to prove to you is that's actually not always the case. But I first started to realize this one night in the fall in Long Beach. I got down to the beach. I went with a friend because we were going to watch what's called a grunion run. Has anybody ever gone to see the grunion run? Know what it is? So every sort of fall, winter, for 2 or 3 days, every few weeks, according to the lunar cycle, the grunion come ashore to breed. They're little fish. They look like this. They're about, 4 or 5 inches long. And you go down to the beach, and you turn the lights off. So, you all have your flashlights because it's dark, but you turn them off so the fish aren't scared. And then you start seeing the ground kind of move. Because what it looks like is this. Thousands and thousands of fish coming up onto the shore. What they do is they ride in on a wave, get their breeding on, and then when the next wave comes along, they kind of try to ride it back out. And the way this works is that the females, they sort of dig themselves into the sand, head facing up, and then the males, if they're lucky enough, when they wash up onto the beach to land near a female, they kind of circle around her. And after the wave is out, they deposit their sperm. It's a substance called milt. And because the ground is kind of wet, it slides down into the sort of temporary hole that she's dug along the side of her body and fertilizes her eggs. And then the next wave comes along, and they swim back out. This is not the sort of ideal picture of nature that we've all been taught about, right? This is a massive, salty, sandy beachside orgy. And we were all there watching. So the story, how do these things kind of evolve, obviously starts with this guy, Charles Darwin. He wrote a book called The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex. And he wrote that the sexual struggle is of two kinds. In the one, it's between individuals of the same sex, generally the males, in order to drive away or kill their rivals. Sometimes now we know it's the females. And in the other, it's between the individuals of the same sex in order to excite or charm those of the opposite sex, generally the females, now we know sometimes the males, which no longer remain passive but select from the more agreeable partner. So we know that this, we know examples of this from the animal kingdom. The peacock's tail, it's the males with the flashy tails. The females kind of look at all the males with their tails and decide which one they like the best. Deer have elaborate antlers. Usually it's the male with the best, strongest, biggest antlers, who can both drive away the competing males. They use them as weapons, but they're also signals of strength. Not every animal has things like antlers or elaborate tails. There are animals that sort of use behavior to try to charm or excite a member of the opposite sex, like these mannequin birds. If you're a female mannequin bird, you're going to look at all the males during their dance and choose the one whose dance you like the best. The great bowerbird does something really interesting. He's kind of an artist. What he does is he creates these bowers, and he chooses rocks, and he arranges them in size order, with the biggest ones at the back. So he creates a visual illusion where if he stands at the back of his bower, he will appear physically larger than he is. And then the female will pass by the front of his bower and judge him, and if she likes what she sees, then perhaps he'll get lucky that night. Springbok do something a little bit different. They just jump really high. If you're the male springbok and you can jump the highest, then hopefully the female will choose you. They also release they have these flaps that open and release pheromones. So they get sort of 2 tricks for the price of 1. Now we do this too. We display ostentatious plumage. We show off our artistic talents. And we also show off our resources, which is something that perhaps is a little bit more unique to us. The problem is, sometimes you can fake it, right? In order for a signal to be honest, you can't fake it, which is a problem for us. So the question is, what can we learn from the animals in order to better sort of make our own decisions? So there are a lot of ways that we choose our mates that are not necessarily as overt as what kind of watch you're wearing. So if you find yourself in a situation where you have to choose between these 2 guys, and you might want to sort of hear what they sound like.
You see, I've got a problem.
And even if I hadn't shown you their pictures, you would know that this voice comes from this guy on the right? It's a stronger, deeper voice, probably not coming from the guy on the left. And that's because, in general, overall body size is correlated with the length of our vocal tracts. And that, in turn, is correlated with something called formant dispersions. It's not important exactly what those are. It's a feature of the physical sound wave. So this is sort of what these vocal cords look like in a koala. You've got sort of your pharynx, your larynx. The larger the koala, the longer the vocal cord, the better sounding the sound, and the way you can tell that is by the formant dispersions. So there's some researchers who went to Australia and took a koala. This is what the male koala sounds like. And so what they did what's called a playback experiment. They took a recording of a single male koala and artificially adjusted the formant dispersions to be of lesser or greater quality. So the only thing that was different between the two recordings was this variable, these formant dispersions. And they put her in her enclosure, in a temporary enclosure, and put a speaker on one side and a speaker on the other side. They played one sound from one side, one sound from the other side. Which way does she go? So the smaller male, the higher formants on one side, the lower formants on the other side. Every time she goes for the male with the lower formants, which suggests that it's a very good indicator of body size, and that body size matters. Which is the first take-home message. If you remember nothing else from this night, is that size matters, but perhaps not in the way we usually think that size matters. Now, the same time these researchers were in Australia studying koalas, there were some other researchers studying North American bison, which are not actually buffalo. And it turns out that there's a similar correlation in bison. Body mass is related to the length of the vocal tract, which is in turn related to the quality of the formant dispersions. So this is what a mating call from a male bison sounds like, from who's a little bit smaller. And this is what it sounds like from a larger male. And as you might expect, they did the playback experiment. The females all like the larger, the sound that appears to be coming from a larger male. And they determined that if you look at the body mass of these animals, it actually does have an impact on their evolutionary success. They have more successful copulations throughout the course of the breeding season, and that leads to a higher number of offspring sired, and also a higher rank in the dominance hierarchy. So it's not just a correlation, it's not just that the females seem to like these males better, it actually has a measurable impact on their breeding success. So what you might expect is that the smallest male bison have the lowest success. The average-sized bison have sort of middle mating success, and the largest bison have the highest mating success. But when they split out the data and looked individually, according to how successful these males were over the course of the breeding season, what they discovered is that these guys were not actually any larger than the ones with average mating success. They just sounded larger, which leads us to our second take-home message, is that while size does matter, you can fake it. I want to come back to this idea. This is, again, what we think about when we think about love and romance and sex in the animal kingdom. And I think I've started to convince you that things are a little bit more complicated, but now we're going to have a little bit more fun. Dolphins. We think dolphins are our friends. Like, we grew up watching Flipper. Dolphins are assholes. Dolphins are jerks. The way dolphins mate, dolphins have these really complex social hierarchies, a lot like chimpanzees, a lot like humans, actually. There are gangs of 3 to 4 male dolphins, usually they're related, who swim around. They're sort of small little gang. And when they find a female, they will separate her from her group, keep her for 3 or 4 or 5 days. If she tries to escape, they will smack her with their tails, they will bite her, and they will repeatedly try to breed with her, and then when they're done, she can go back to return to her group. Dolphins are assholes. And by the way, sea otters, you know, you think they're so cute, they're kind of swimming there and they have their sea urchins on their bellies. They do the same thing. So, just so you know. If you only remember one thing, it's that dolphins are assholes. Can anybody identify broadly what kind of creature this is? This is a fly. It's a cave fly. This is the first time we've ever discovered an animal, in this case it's an insect, where it's the females who penetrate the males. You may have seen headlines saying that it was a female penis. Actually, it's called a gynosome. And while the males still provide the sperm to the females, it's the females who have to kind of go in and scoop it out. And this thing, just like bee stingers, is also covered in spikes. So when the female finds a male that she likes, she goes and she penetrates him, and the barbs come out, and he can't escape even if he wanted to. And here's how the researchers discovered that this tiny little cave fly had barbs on its gynosome. When they physically tried to separate the male and the male split in half. The longest recorded sexual encounter that the researchers saw between these guys was something on the order of 20 hours. Come back to dolphins. This is a diorama from the Museum of Sex in New York. This is a male, and this is also a male. And that is a blowhole, and that is not a flipper. This may be the only true blowjob in the animal kingdom. And it happens all the time. Not all sex in the animal kingdom is for procreation. Can anybody identify what kind of critter this is? These are cuttlefish. They're related to octopuses and squids. And what's really interesting about cuttlefish is because they're really good at camouflage, they can control the way they look. So when a male finds a female that he wants to impress, on the half of his body that she can see, he'll sort of display the sort of mating display of a cuttlefish. And then if another male comes along, he will actually change the side of his body that the other male can see to appear female. So once again, humans are not the only ones who sometimes like to dress up as if they were the opposite sex. If a rival male comes along and he sees two females hanging out, he might be more likely to keep on swimming than to try to mate with the actual female. So when a male giraffe is walking through his herd and he sees a female that he likes, if she likes him, she just starts peeing, and he tastes her urine. It's called urine testing. And if he likes what he tastes, and there are certain metabolites in the urine that are correlated with things like the stage of her breeding cycle, if he likes what he tastes, then maybe she will agree to breed with him. This is a hippo. Hippos, I believe, are the most underrated of the African megafauna. A fully grown hippo can bite a fully grown crocodile in half. Right? I know. Everyone likes the elephants and like the lions, but hippos are the most badass of all of them. They're also really fast. More people are killed every year by hippos than by sharks. So again, a male is hanging around in the water and a female comes by and he really likes her. He will use his tail to fling as much poo over in her direction as he can. And if she likes him, she'll do the same thing. I have a colleague that calls this a shit and piss hurricane. Humans were not the first ones to invent these kinds of activities. These are whales. These are North Atlantic right whales. That's a male. That's a female. That is also a male. In science, what we call this is simultaneous intromission. In the real world, what we call this is a threesome. So once again, humans were not the first ones to invent these kinds of activities. So the last thing that you should remember, again, the first thing you should remember, if nothing else, is that dolphins are assholes. But if you remember some other things, it's that love and sex is just as complicated in the animal kingdom as it is for us. We're not all that special in sort of, having different kinds of interests when it comes to sex. I think that, in general, looking at animals is, in a way, we tend to think of ourselves as very special. And looking at animals is kind of looking at a funhouse mirror, at your own reflection in a funhouse mirror, because what you get back is obviously not a perfect reflection of who you are. Something is exaggerated, but you're still getting something fundamental back about what it means to be human. So no matter what kind of weird thing that you think you're into and you think you might be the only one, I promise there's a species somewhere in the animal kingdom for whom it is just how it works. It is the norm.